Hello again, this is Don Larson speaking. We're ready to begin our webinar. The agenda for our webinar today is going to be, first we'll do an introduction, which we're doing now, and then we'll go over the webinar housekeeping rules. I'll give a quick company overview, and then we'll dive into the presentation and demo, the main part of our webinar presentation, and then we'll wrap it up with a summary where we'll have a Q&A and then some closing information. So the housekeeping rules, these are the standard GoToWebinar housekeeping rules, but we'll just go over them again. All attendees will be muted for the duration of the webinar. If you should experience any technical issues while we're doing the webinar, please use the little questions box in the webinar control panel. Computer audio is the recommended option, but you can also phone in too. We do have some data sheets available and some little handouts. There's a little box there where you can just drag and drop those to your desktop. They're just some handouts of stuff we prepared relevant to this webinar. And then post questions in the questions box. You can do them anytime as you think of them going through a webinar. Feel free to post them, but we'll wait to the end of the webinar to actually address those questions. For those of you not familiar with Larson Software technology, we're based in Houston, Texas. We recently moved to a new location, but we're still in the same part of town. We were founded in 1984. We're known as graphics technology experts for over 30 years. We develop powerful, innovative graphics software for end user products and toolkits based on open graphic standards. We've promoted the CGM usage by originally with a free CGM viewer, which was recently replaced by a subscription version, which you can download, purchase and download a copy from our store on our website. We're the developer of the first HTML CGM viewer that eliminates the need for a plugin. We're a member of the CGM Open Foundation, and in general, our products simplify the graphics workflow for technical publications professionals. You can find out more about us at our website at www.cgmlarson.com or svglarson.com. So we invite you to do that for more detailed information. So I'll now turn it over to David Manick for the main part of our presentation, and I'll be rejoining you after for the Q&A session.
Hello, welcome everybody, and thank you, Don, for that introduction. Probably a topic that a lot of the audience is familiar with, but brief introduction to the S1000D specification. Really was introduced in the 1980s. And was used back then as well, although it was a very early version of the spec. The main concept was to hold the information in a modular form, in data modules. And that's still the case today. So you'll see the term data module and data module code crop up during the presentation. The objective of the spec really was to make easier to manage the publication, a flexible way of doing that, and publishing the documentation. So we could interchange information between projects, perhaps, if it's in a modular form rather than a book form. I would say today S1000D is very widely adopted in lots of different countries, including the USA, UK, and many countries in Europe. So it's certainly widely used, and I think in an important specification, especially in the aerospace and defense industries. My feeling is graphics and kind of the multimedia side is sometimes overlooked, but it's still a kind of a critical component of the S1000D deliverable. So it has its own unique requirements. And so today we want to really point some of those things out, some of those requirements that you might have to be actually supplying to your customer. So this is based on the issue 5 of the spec, S1000D specification. It is available at s1000d.org for download. So if you're interested, there's a lot of information on there, some good information, examples, even illustrations. So I would always recommend that you go to the website s1000d.org and download the latest version. So we're mainly focusing today on the graphical part. So illustrations in the main. So we've really split it into 3 different sections: authoring, identifying, and interactivity. And I think those are the main ones that that really we need to look at from an illustration point of view. There's a lot of information in the spec. Some of it is not relevant, so we really want to give you that high level look at what you need to be compliant, or need to do to be compliant. So the first section is authoring. So all these are taken directly from the spec. So don't be concerned about taking notes, because we'll be sending the slides, or the slides will be available for download. So don't be concerned about having to take a lot of notes. Excuse me. So in 392, we get all the illustration rules and also rules around multimedia. Don't be concerned about that. These are screenshots from the spec, so if they look a bit blurry, don't try and focus your monitor or anything. So they're just taken directly from the spec. So just saves a lot of time for this presentation. So we're looking at illustrations in general, we're looking at color, and we'll briefly look at each interactive and 3D content. Although there's only a small really part of the spec dedicated to 3D currently. So in the introduction for this particular chapter, it gives you some guidance on legacy illustrations, which I think is important. There's still a lot of legacy out there, like scanned in images and so forth. Very difficult to do very much with them, other than put them into your manual. But there is some guidance around it, so just to make you aware of that. But this chapter really focuses on trying to make the illustrations common, a look and feel that's similar, and there's some really primary illustration rules you need to be aware of if you're creating something new, new illustrations. So this is the chapter. It's quite a long chapter, so like I say, we won't be looking at all of it today. But if you want to go to the spec, and you can go through this in more detail, but just to give you a good high-level view of what you're going to need to do to be compliant. So these are all rules that I really think of as common sense, really. So illustrations must communicate in a simple, clear, and economical way. Visually enhance the technical information required by the user to perform the intended task. So, in other words, really, it needs to be, an illustration is only really required if the text needs further explanation. And it needs to be prepared in accordance with the written text as well. So pretty much what you would do in a technical manual anyway, but these are all common sense things I think that we're all aware of if we're in the publications industry. So it gives some guidance on the mode of presentation. And obviously this is going back into where we delivered a lot of print and so forth, and we still do deliver print. So illustrations primarily in an orientation of portrait. You can use landscape and fold outs, but it's something you would usually need to define within your project business rules of S1000D. So if you intend to use a fold out or landscape, then you should really put that into the business rules. But I think mainly today, a lot of the manuals are interactive, in other words, electronic. But there could still be the ability to print from them as well. So you have to consider this. I think if you're printing from if you give the ability to print from the IETP or ITM, that it's going to format correctly. So just really to give you a heads up that, you know, if you have that print ability, then still it needs to print correctly. That could cause issues with the data if it doesn't. So what are those illustration rules and what are the objectives of them? Mainly to give the illustration a consistent appearance. And again, it's what we try to do in technical manuals. You want each illustration to have the same kind of look and feel. So the perspective, the isometric projection is recommended. And this is mainly the projection we would see in like a spare parts type illustration. There's a recommended illustration page size. There's recommended line weights, line styles, annotations, and symbols. So I really like the guide. I really like the spec in this respect because of what it does is give you some really good ways of kind of making your illustrations look and feel the same way. So I think that's some good guidance there. Also on color as well, some really good guidance on color and the use of color. So the illustration really needs to be concise. No extraneous data that could confuse the end user. Usually monochrome, but color could be used. And within the spec, we have these what we call BRDPs, or business rules decision points. So there's one around the use of color. So you can define it to be used or not, depending on the project. So if you're defining the project, you can do that, or if you're complying to a particular customer's project, then you need to be aware if you can use color or not. So a business rule decision point, you'll see these crop up a few times during the presentation today, but they're really just a code that's associated with a particular decision that you're going to make as part of the spec or somebody's made for you. So this one is the use of color. So you can see 3921 BRDP is use of color in the final deliverable. And the business rules decision points all have the same format. So you should be able to see them as part of the spec. Probably you'll see the something will be delivered to you as a spreadsheet or something like that, so you'll be able to go through those. So that's just a quick explanation of the decision points. Okay, so line weights. This was actually changed in issue 4, and they've tried to kind of streamline this a bit and give pens what we call line types. So we can see on our line type 1, the illustration items. It gives you kind of the kind of between 1.8 and 3.5 at a defined kind of line weight. So you could use something between those two line weights. Say for the illustration items, and then reference structures, it's 0.18 or 0.25. So it really clearly defines what line weights you should be using and the type of pen. So on the right hand side, we can see that type 1 is solid, type 2 is dash, type 3 dot, and then dot dash for type 4. So we'll see this as we go along, how these are used on the illustration itself. But these all tables are from the spec. Text, mainly you should be using Arial or Helvetica. There are, again, some kind of defined point sizes that you should be using, or text sizes that you should use. And again, there's a BRDP associated with this about using upper and lower case or sentence case, as we say in the US. So again, there's some rules that you need to be aware of when you're creating the illustration, that you comply to them. So that's BRDP S1 00554. So I'm not going to go into the text, but there is text for callouts, item numbers, notes, legends. And these are all, again, clearly defined within the spec. So, and the point sizes, and we already spoke about the font should probably be Arial or Helvetica. Symbols, there's a whole page of symbols that you really, to comply again, you should use. So we have here like the point, the arrow forward and so forth, up. So again, they've defined what the arrow should look like, and also the line weights around that arrow as well. So again, it's some good information around use of symbols. I think the spec really does a good job of defining all these things. Mentioned the use of color. There's also, I've just highlighted there, there's also the use of color in 3D content as well defined, which is pretty much the same as it is in 2D. But I think a bit more of a challenge for people who want to create and deliver 3D data using specific colors. So spec gives some good examples of the use of color. There's a specific color palette, which I'll show you in a second, which again you should really use to comply to the spec. There's also a section around photographs, which I'm not really going to cover today. But the use of color in the illustration on the right is that yellow is the parts that are attached to the main assembly. So you can see they don't really have a call out number. So they are physically attached and has the same color as the main assembly. Then we have the light blue, which are actual parts. So you can see that they've got a call out by them. And then we have gray parts that are actually part of another illustration where they are defined as part of that illustration. So some really good kind of examples of how you can use color. So I would recommend, again, you look at the spec for that in more detail. So this is the color palette. So you could see the three that we use there, like yellow, light blue, and light gray, are all at the bottom here. But these are other colors in the palette. So you really shouldn't be using anything outside of these if you're going to use color within your illustrations. So let's just go to VisX Edit, and I'm going to show you what we've created. And this is really what we call our illustration guide. So a lot of the things we've just seen, now we've put into a CGM file, which we're going to make available to you as actually attending today. And it's on our website anyway, so anybody could actually get to it. We can't actually put it as a handout, but we have put it as a handout as a PDF. So GoToWebinar doesn't really support CGM. So this illustration, it's CGM, so you could open it in our software, or you could, in theory, open it in other software that supports CGM. So let me just zoom in. And this, you can see the portrait orientation that we talked about at the beginning. And the actual illustration reproduction area should be 170 by 222 millimeters. So that's really the restriction of where your illustration should fall. Again, if you're creating with an IETP only, then I think really that restriction goes away, because you could, in theory, view at any size. But if you're actually printing, if you're allowed to print from the IETM, it should really conform to this. So we spoke about projection. So this is all in the isometric. So an isometric perspective projection. So everything will follow the grid lines on here. Line weights. So let's just kind of zoom in again on this area. So I can see my line weights here that have been defined. And we've defined them over here as well in our drop-down menu. So illustration items are 1. So that's all directly going back to the specification. You don't have to call them this. They could be called other names, but we've just done this for the presentation. So you can see we've got illustration items. There's type 1, it's solid. The line weight is between 0.18 and 0.35. And then we have the reference the reference structure, which is a line weight of either 0.18 or 0.25. So we can see on our panel here, we've got 0.35 we've chosen, it's solid, and this is the illustration of items. And then the line weight 2, if I just click on this, it should actually change the panel on the right. So we then change to 2, should do. There we go. So this, you can see this is a 0.18. And this is used as a reference structure, or it could be like a construction line or something like that. And then behind here, we've got a hidden line, which is a dotted line. So this has got a pattern of a dot. It's a 0.25 line. So we've really kind of tried to create this illustration for you that you could use it perhaps to as a template or something like that down the road if you're going to use BizXedit or another piece of software. Not really sure how it would come through the pen weights if you were using something else. So text, this is Arial. So we're using Arial and 12 point here for the annotations. So again, we're complying to the spec. And symbols, if I just bring up my library thing, which you might have seen in the video at the beginning, we've actually created some that are those symbols that you can just drag and drop onto the illustration. So we've done a cross section of them or a sample of them, and we'll probably create some more in the future. They're actually in the spec, so it just makes your life a bit easier. And obviously, you could create your own as well and add that to the library. Let's just zoom out, and then we'll just. I've also created a color palette down here as well. So these are the actual colors that are defined in the spec. So we've got the ones that we saw earlier, light yellow, light blue, and these are the RGB specifications for that particular color. Okay, let's just go back to the presentation. So just going for the use of color in 3D content, and I think 3D is becoming more relevant as we move forward. But in theory, it should be the same color palette as we've just seen. And projects really should define that color scheme for the whole program. And projects should also define devices and viewers capable of displaying the data and use that color consistently. Color of red should only be used for warnings, amber for cautions. So if it's a realistically rendered surface, then really the color rules do not apply. And also the recommending gradient color for the background of a 3D deliverable or 3D graphic. And also they should be supported by symbols and markings if required for if somebody's actually interacting with that particular graphic. So they're kind of really high level, I would say, the kind of specification dealing with 3D at the moment. And I think there's some specific challenges around that as well, which we'll talk about later on. Which is now, to be honest. So there are some guidelines. So I think some of these, again, are common sense that the 3D content should be verified and, verified engineering information. And it should all, again, only be used to enhance the user experience. And should always contain warnings and cautions when parts are removed. There's no real update to the guidance in issue 5 that I've found, but I think it should be there should be more kind of information around dealing with 3D. Probably will have to be defined by the user at the moment, like via a project business rule. And my main concern would be viewing the data. That there's so many 3D viewers out there that you really need to define what viewer the user should be downloading if they don't get any part of their deliverable. So how do we identify an illustration or a piece of multimedia? We do that through the information control number, or the ICN. So you're probably all aware that data modules, they're all assigned a unique code. But so multimedia objects and illustrations, they have a similar code called the ICN code. And again, it has a business rules decision point associated with it, and that's the use of it on the illustration itself. So it really the decision is, should it be presented within or outside the reproduction area? I've mainly seen it outside, as you can see from the little kind of graphic on the right, that it would usually be outside the illustration area. So the main structure that I've seen, there are two possibilities. There's this one called a cage, and then there's another one, the Modelic version. But this is the main one I've seen for ICN, which is not as complex. So you always prefix it with the ICN, and then you give the cage code, which would be the company that's actually originated the illustration, and then the unique identifier, which I would probably recommend that has something connected to the project. So the DM code, you might use the model ID there in some way or form as part of the identifier. Then the issue number and classification. So every illustration has to have this. So you can't escape from creating this. So as you create a data module requirements list, you would create an illustration requirements list or multimedia list as well. I've not seen this used for illustrations, but there is the possibility that you could use something closer to the data module code, which is obviously a lot more work to do and generate. But again, you could use this for ICNs as well. But I've personally not really seen it as part of projects. It's probably too complex, really. So just quickly going back to the illustration, what we've also done is just created this little guide as part of the illustration as well. So let me just close this down. So you'll have all that information here when you get this illustration. Again, it's PDF, so you could also drag and drop the PDF over. So the information control number is positioned at that bottom right, and these are we've just done the cage code version. So you've got all that information there as well, what it means and so forth. So the final section is interactivity or hotspots, whatever you want to call it. And again, the use of hotspots has grown definitely. It really gives the user a better experience, I think, using the especially interactive manuals, obviously. So what are they? Well, they're interactive areas of the graphic, usually used for navigation in some way or linking. So they usually trigger an action, and that could be a link, or they might just do something if you hover over them. So text in a data module could link you to an illustration, or text in a data module to multiple areas of an illustration. Probably the best example would be like a spare parts type illustration. One region of an illustration, so this could go both ways. So you could have a link from the text, or you could link from the illustration to the data module. Or it could be a link within the illustration, so one part of an illustration to another or to a completely new illustration. So these are all guided by the spec again. So a lot of information around interactivity. So usually I'd say the call out numbers are the main kind of hot things that are hot spotted. So as part of a parts list. There's even guidance on what you should actually hotspot. So you shouldn't really hotspot kind of if there's a multiplier on there, it should just really be the call out number itself. So there's a whole chapter on hotspots. So if you, again, we can't cover all that today, but there's a lot of detailed information on the use of hotspots and interactivity within the specification. Quite a long chapter number there, but like I say, we'll make the slides available. So hotspot information, it can be included in potentially 4 different files, but only 2 really are required, and the other 2 are kind of optional. So if you're having an interactivity between a data module and illustration, then you have to have some information in the data module, obviously the right XML code, and then you need to have the relevant illustration, the CGM file with the relevant hotspot information to do the linking between the 2. The optional ones really are, one One is again detailed in the spec, or both of them are, but one is more common than the other, and that's the XML companion file. So that is where you could actually keep information independent of the data module. So this can be useful, and it is used in different applications so for the ease of editing and so forth. And we can create an XCF as part of creating the illustration, so it could save time for the technical writer having to insert that information. And also, there's in issue 4, they came up with a new file called the IMF file, or IMF ICN metadata file, which is also XML, which is more akin to the things you would have in a data module for the issue and status of the illustration. So much more detailed, and we'll kind of take a brief look at that in a moment. So a data module, as you probably know, is all XML. So it's compliant with the specification. And usually issue 4 and above for recent projects. So I would say that if you're going behind, if you're lower than that, then you're probably not using interactivity. The CGM file information needs to be inserted into that data module along with the hotspot information. The companion file gives you the option to really store that information outside of the data module if you want to as part of your project. But the thing is here, you need to make sure that the CGM viewer that you're using is able to support the companion file. Not all of them do. The IMF file, which was new in issue 4.2, also has this ability, the same as the XCF file, the companion file, but has a lot more functionality over and above that for the ID and status of the graphic. So a lot more complex. Not really seen it adopted as yet, but really there's a dependency really on the kind of the CSDB vendors to support that. So just a kind of graphical visualization of that, where we have the data module here on the left, and then we have the graphic on the right. And this is the XML code that's relevant to this hotspot. If you're interested, we have a blog on our website. So there's a whole kind of parts of information, different 4-part kind of series of information on hotspots. So you can go to that. It's on our website under blog. So you might find that useful for more detailed information. So this is the XCF file. So this is what you can easily create from, say, VisXedit, and contains all that all this information separate to the data module. So we can easily create that within VisXedit. So you can see that it contains all the hotspot information for a particular illustration. And then this is the structure of the XCF. I'm not going to go into this in too much detail, but it is all in the spec. It's in chapter 7.32. So it's not something we've made up or anything like that. That is actually part of the spec and has been for some time. So if you're interested in using XCF, a companion file for metadata, then please go and look at the spec and see what you're going to need to comply to. But we can do that automatically from VisXedit. I'll show that in a few minutes. The IMF does contain the same. It looks very similar to the XCF, but it is really a pure XML file. It has its own schema and so forth. So we don't currently support kind of automatic generation of it. We would really need to kind of work with a vendor, a CSDB vendor, a data module authoring software to do that. But I really like the idea, but really it needs the support of vendors to actually implement this. As I said, it's quite complex. There's a whole chapter again dedicated to it, 3972. And again, we have a blog On the blog, you'll find there's another series of articles on that particular ICN metadata file that you can go and look at. It's quite detailed again about the use of it, the construct of it, why it was done, and it's really to give that extra level of detail for the illustration to be managed in a CSDB, kind of the same level that a data module code would have, and would really help somebody who's running the CSDB to look where the illustration is for like check in, check out, and things like that. It could be quite powerful to manage illustrations. So let's just quickly go back to VisXedit, and let's just scale that down, and hotspots. So this has got hotspots on it, this illustration. If I just click here at the top, I can view them. So I can see the hotspots for this particular illustration. I've made them the region a bit bigger so we can see them easily. So each one of these hotspots has a companion over here where we could modify the attributes for that hotspot. So we keep it in this tree view. So each hotspot we can then go in and modify. We could add a screen tip to it. We could have a URL. And then we could obviously save that as part of the CGM file. Or we could create an XCF file directly. So all the data you saw in that slide, we could create that XCF file for this particular illustration automatically. Okay, let's just go to the, so what do these look like, the hotspots, when we take them into the viewer? So this is just using our VisXview HTML5 technology, so there's no plugin for the CGM. But you could see here we could have the interactivity between the graphic and the parts list. So this is what I was talking about, what properties the hotspots can have. So we can have that interaction. And in turn, we could go the other direction. If I just go to one and then click, you can see that it highlights it in the other direction as well. So we have that kind of two-way interaction between the hotspot on the graphic and the text, in this case the parts list. So this is just a little demo we created to try and put that over. There could also be tooltips on here as well. So I mentioned that companion file. So let's just go over to here. So other information that could be in the companion file is, say, the screen tip. So there could be that you need to, we've got the English version, but we might also want to see the German version of the tooltip. So that is all done with the XML companion file. So that would be quite difficult to contain within a data module. But with this, we could contain the information in that companion file. So Spanish, for instance, could be in here as well. So just to give you an idea of how that companion file could be used. So not just for hotspot information, but for kind of the screen tips and so forth. Okay, so hopefully that gives you a good idea of hotspots and companion files. So that really covers the interactivity, the hotspot side. So those were all the three sections we wanted to cover today. Just to give you a quick summary on the spec, I would say it's not substantially changed for illustration creation for some time. So I think the mainly would be cosmetic, I would say, the illustration guide. There have been the additional 3D elements to that. The main addition really has been the IMF XML option, but I've not really seen anybody adopt that at this time. We've made that CGM illustration available that I've been showing throughout the presentation. So if I just click on here, we just go to the website and it's actually here under support. So this will be the page that you see. Click on the graphic here, and that will download the CGM for you. So CGM, it continues to be the primary file format for compliance to the spec. There's a lot of kind of interest in SVG, but in our experience at the moment, it's really being used to display the graphics in, say, an IETP. And that's really because of the whole thing around plugins and so forth. As you can see, today we're using CGM without a plugin, but a lot of end users kind of got nervous around plugins and browsers and so on, and decided that they wanted to use SVG. You know, we have no issue with that at all. We have our own profile for SVG, but I think the main thing to remember with SVG is it wasn't designed as a data exchange format. It was designed to display vector graphics in a web environment. So we've done a lot of work around SVG, and not really talking about much of it today. There's a webinar that on our YouTube channel you can watch, CGM and SVG. Please look at that if you want to learn more about SVG in our tech SVG profile. 3D, I'm really surprised that there's no 3D file format been specified for the S1000D specification. It doesn't seem a difficult thing to do on the face of it, because there's some good choices out there, but obviously there's work to actually put it in the spec. So at the moment, it's a bit of a free-for-all, and that could cause problems around interoperability and projects. So I would say that one needs to be defined sooner rather than later. And if it's not defined by the spec, then as I said, define it in the project that you're going to use. And that's really because there's so many different viewers of 3D data out there that it could be very difficult to deliver the data. So I think, you know, with Larson, we're continuing to be at the forefront of S1000D from a graphics point of view. That's where we want to stay. We know we do a lot of events around that and do these webinars as well to try and help our customers and the industry in general. So at that point, I'm going to open up to some questions. So if you want to post those now, please do. I'm going to let Don come back in at this point as well. You there, Don?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. So I have a question here, probably best for you, Don, because you are part of CGM Open. And can a CGM file be validated?
Yeah, you can generally validate the metadata, or you can't really. There's really not a way to generate or to validate the content. Let's say that to make sure that all the proper colors, that was limited to the colors and line weights, let's say, that you wanted, but you can validate the structure, the metadata, so that it conforms. So there is some level of validation, yes.
Yeah, I think as far as the content goes, that would be probably more part of a either a project or an internal QA, you know, to check the illustration, you know, either visually or, you know, kind of print of the illustration. But yeah, the content, as you say, is not an easy thing to actually validate. Also, I've got another question here that I might take, which is, do you see projects using the IMF in the future? And that's the IMF, that's an XML file. And I think it would have to be a new project. I don't see any older legacy projects going back and using the IMF. And there's also that dependency on software vendors to support it. And that includes ourselves, you know, that we would need to support like the easy generation of an IMF from, say, within VisXedit, as we do with XCF. But also, it would only be really relevant then within data management system, a CSDB, an S1000 CSDB. So there's kind of two dependencies. There's one on the illustration software, but there's then the actual CSDB vendor as well. So it'd be something that would have to be done in collaboration, and probably also have to have a business case or a customer who really will benefit from using it, I think. Another question here, I know I really only touched on SVG at the end, Don, but yeah, there's a question around, is there a proposed SVG profile for S1000D? Perhaps you might want to answer that one.
Yes, yeah, well, there is. We've developed one. Now, there may be others, but we've developed one too, and with primarily our goal in developing it, or purpose of the SVG profile, was to improve interchangeability. Like David had said in his webinar at some point, the SVG was never really intended as a graphics exchange format. In other words, to pass between illustration tools or editors. It was designed primarily for going to the web, and it's very good at that and rich. But there was no profile that would, let's say, make possible a nice, clean interchange between CGM and SVG, go bi-directional. So yes, we've developed one. There is, of course, the W3C profiles, like SVG is divided into profiles too. It has what's called Tiny, which is a limited SVG that was developed for mobile applications only. And then there's Basic, and then there's Full. And our products are currently supporting what's called SVG Basic, and our SVG profile that we developed, Tech SVG, was based on, takes as a baseline SVG Basic as the SVG profile, and then we have a layer on top of it to make it more well defined for interchange. So yes, we do have that, and that's we can make that available. It's on, like Dave is pointing to, our website, where it's available for those of you who are interested in that.
Yeah, I think it's not part of the S1000D spec, though, is it, Don? We have kind of communicated that we created this and made it available publicly for people to comment on. But we did it kind of, I would say, for probably a selfish reason, is that we needed to have some kind of spec that governed the interchange of SVG data in our own software. So this was one of the reasons we created it, was to make it easier for customers to interchange SVG with our software. And it's made it a lot easier to define where SVGs from other software, the elements that they're creating, why they're causing issues. So you can download the profile. It's not a file, it's a PDF file, and we welcome comments on that. So it's not part of S1000D at the moment. So I wanted to, yeah, I think that's the end of the questions. I'd like to thank everybody for those questions, and thanks, Don, for your answers. So thanks for attending. We know these are difficult times, so thank you for taking the time out today and joining us. There will be a recording that will be sent out, an email sent out tomorrow to yourselves and to people who didn't attend today, who didn't have the time. Please that will be on our YouTube channel, so please share that. You could even like it if you do. We now take a bit of a summer break for webinars. This is our usual kind of way we do things. We're thinking the next webinar is going to be the end of August, and the focus at this time will be on 3D, which has cropped up today. We think this is a really important topic. So, please, join us when we release that date, and you can register. Our next kind of live events are dictated by current events. They're both next year. So So S1000D user forum is going to be in June 14th, 16th in Renton, Washington State. Hopefully, I think we should be good by then. The registration hasn't opened, so you can get details from the website s1000d.org, but you can't register yet. And we also will be taking part in the Raytheon Eagle User Conference in Tucson. Raytheon use our technology within their CSDB, their data management software. So really good event if you've not attended before. You don't have to be particularly a user, although it's called a user conference. They welcome all. So that's a really good event in a very nice location. So hopefully next year we'll be taking part in those. If there are any other live events that kind of crop up this year, that we'll make you aware of those. So thank you for attending today. Hope you got something from it. We'll be sending the email out with the information to link to the slides. You already know where to go to get the CGM file. So thanks for attending and stay safe, everybody. Thank you.